Welcome to the wonderful world of Ghost Horse Hollow. I'm your host, Anne Severn Williamson, and this is My Family Book Nook. My Family Book Nook podcast is brought to you by the Owsley County Public Library in Booneville, Kentucky, and by Jackson Energy, a Touchstone energy cooperative, and by Ghost Horse Gifts, featuring the fine intaglio jewelry and gemstone sculpture of artisan Jack Williamson, on the web at www.etsy.com/shop/ghosthorse-gifts. My Family Book Nook features the saga of the MacKennon homesteaders 100 years in the future in the Appalachian wilderness. Listeners may wish to follow along in the fairy lore of Ghost Horse Hollow, available on Amazon Books and Kindle Readers, starting with Book 1, Turn of the Blade. My Family Book Nook also shares stories, myths, and legends from around the globe in support of world literacy, conservation, and cultural exchange. And now for our ongoing adventure from the fairy lore of Ghost Horse Hollow. We left off with Farmer Jake MacKennon deciding to go to the dead oak tree that very evening. He plans to take along Panther, his 16-year-old daughter, as a translator to meet with the fairy prince Tormac and the Coyote King. His two best friends, Jonas Whitehand and Aaron Ray, have volunteered to go along with them for protection. Chapter 3. Meet the MacKennons. Blackbottom watched the three men climb the gentle slope to the front porch of the MacKennon home. The rooster was royally perched atop the weather vane above the largest barn. There were 3 structures in the hollow devoted to horses, creatures that Blackbottom found tiresome at best. One barn sheltered the mares and their newborn foals. It stood relatively close to the 2-story farmhouse. A second facility held the farm's 3 stallions, Elevar's Ivory Steed, Accolon's Bay Moon, and a high-stepping 3-year-old named Ravenwood. The MacKennons had structured a larger building suitable for hay storage between the mare barn and the stallion barn. The hay barn also contained a tack room for saddles, halters, bridles, blankets, and grooming supplies. The ladies of the farm used fairy creams and shampoos on the horses, which accounted for the animals' extremely lengthy tails and healthy manes. Several jars on the grooming shelves were marked Sparkle Spritz. This mysterious supply had been a gift from the Frost Fairy, who had intended the spritz to be used for decorating hooves. The MacKennons, rather unexpectedly, discovered that the fairy product had a tendency to float a horse a few inches off the ground, which made riding somewhat difficult. The dairy goat barn and the old tobacco barn were located slightly downhill from the farmhouse. The goats had pleaded for privacy. They weren't overly fond of the horses either. They preferred to huddle in one large group, scratch their horns against their sides, and chew their cuds. The horses, for the most part, found the goats intolerable, although once in a great while a billy goat and a lonely stallion could be seen grazing together. Blackbottom loved his high vantage point, even if the wind did occasionally twirl the weather vane around and around. The metal decoration was in the shape of a galloping horse. Blackbottom was most displeased when Lady MacKennon had selected a horse silhouette to preside over the hollow instead of that of a rooster. He felt that perching on the horse's copper head made his opinion well known. Directly below the weather vane, the farm's buff-colored doves gathered for their evening breadcrumbs. The small birds cooed, pecked, and strutted about in amorous circles. They took to flight when a black cat with one white paw slinked out of the barn. The doves instinctively formed a flying diamond and swerved back and forth over the nearby cornfields. They landed once more beside their crumbly dinner just as the tomcat had disappeared into the greenhouse. With trembling whiskers, Minky Mitten hungrily watched the doves from behind the lemon-glass window-pane. Black Bottom noted that the ghost horse mares were waiting impatiently at the meadow gate. It was time for their evening grain. 11 elegant noses were pointing in the same direction. The lead mare, Gwyddia's Stardust Serenade, stood first in line. She was responsible for the safety and well-being of all the other mares and their foals. She dominated the other herd members much as the rooster presided over his hens. Black Bottom admired her leadership, but avoided Gwyddia's large hooves whenever possible. The stallions ate separately in their own paddocks. The MacKennons fed every horse quite well, for the family's survival was dependent upon the strength and health of their equine friends. Mountain horses were highly sought after for their ability to negotiate rough trails, drag heavy logs out of the woods, and pull iron plows through tough stony fields. Besides, the mountain horses could rock a rider gently in the saddle for hours on end. They moved smoothly over the land with a flowing action that was instinctive from birth. The result was a comfortable traveling motion that enabled a rider to hold a cup of fairy brew in one hand without spilling a precious drop. The MacKennons went the extra mile by taking the horse's natural ability to a state of well-trained perfection. As Jake always said, a good mountain horse should cross a field like a swan gliding over the water. Black Bottom thought the horses were spoiled. There they waited, accustomed to receiving oats, field corn, and orchard grass hay at the sunset. The mares tossed their heads, snorted, and nipped at each other's flanks. Gwyddia's Stardust Serenade voiced her deep, demanding neigh. "Disgusting!" the rooster clucked into the restless wind. The breeze responded by spinning the weather vane in rapid circles. Black Bottom attempted to crow in defiance, but was altogether too dizzy. He puffed out his breast feathers to regain his balance, fell off the roof, and landed on a horse's rump. Jake's graceful mount, Titremia's Starshield, reared and blew angrily through her nose. She gave Black Bottom one big pluck, which sent the rooster sailing through the air. The blue-eyed mare pranced over toward the farmer with her tail set high, just as MacKennon and his two companions approached the meadow's split-rail fence. Black Bottom let out a confused cluck-cluck and crashed headfirst into the duck pond. The waterfowl quacked in protest and splashed over to their rocky island. Was it not shameful? How many times had that ridiculous rooster flown into their territory by mistake? Black Bottom emerged, looking thin and wet, and made his way grumpily over to the hen-house. For once he did not stop to see if anyone was admiring his tail feathers. Jake laughed aloud and reached out lovingly to stroke Starshield's silky neck. She was a cremello, like most of the horses in the hollow. Their creamy white coats and light blue eyes had inspired MacKennon to choose a name for his herd. One awesome night, while standing in a starlit pasture, the farmer whispered softly, and the cremello mares had come galloping toward him. As the low-lying mist drifted and tumbled over their thundering hooves, the horses set in motion a spell-binding memory that could not easily be forgotten. The imagery of that moment sparked the magic that played throughout the hollow. It was a magic brought on by friendship and love, loyalty and beauty, lost in a fragment of time, but eternal in the mind of the soul. The ghost horse name was born in that instant. Titremia's Starshield breathed deeply into Jake's own nostrils as the farmer bent toward his favorite mare. Their ritual horsey greeting established trust. A sense of warm familiarity passed between man and animal, offering both reassurance and peace. An intelligent conversation had occurred without words. MacKennon knew that true communication was an emotional process. He never needed to explain this to a horse, but found that most humans had forgotten that tidbit of wisdom. "We ride tonight, my friend. Tell the others to be ready," the farmer said quietly. The mare flipped her tail and stamped. She and Jake understood one another. The MacKennons had raised Titremia's Starshield on bottles of fresh goat's milk when the filly's mother could not produce enough nourishment for her foal. The farmer always claimed that the sweet milk had made the long-legged mare as nimble as any goat when it came to climbing up and down the country hills. "I'll take the milking tonight," Aaron Ray interrupted. "You'll be needing to talk with Hannah. Tell her I'll be in directly." "I'll see to the horses," White Hand broke in. MacKennon's friends turned willingly to their chores. Jake realized that they did not want to confront his wife. Hannah Rose MacKennon had a powerful way about her that was charming but formidable. She was also the most beautiful woman that Jake had ever known. With her cascading golden hair and dazzling cornflower blue eyes, Hannah made it difficult for a man to concentrate on what he was saying. He was just bound to lose any argument with her. The fact that she was part mermaid, part fairy, and part human did not make things any easier. Hannah could read a man's thoughts like another woman could read a recipe book. Jake nodded to the men and slowly turned up the stone pathway toward home. This part of my Family Book Nook podcast is dedicated to world conservation. Everyone can make a difference by restoring the world's forests, conserving energy, recycling, developing and sharing green technologies, farming organically, preserving wilderness, and protecting our pollinators. To live in harmony with the earth is to respect the sacred hoop of life. And now our adventure continues. By the time the farmer had crossed the third troll bridge and had reached the bottom of the steps leading to the MacKennons' inviting front porch, Hannah had opened the screen door for her husband. She already knew that something was amiss. Perhaps he had given his secret away by subtle changes in his confident stride. She sure looked pretty in her homemade calico patchwork dress and white cotton apron. Her expressive hands were dusty with flour from kneading her famous buttermilk biscuits. "How's the best cook and baker in the whole territory?" Jake asked casually. "Don't carry on so," Hannah MacKennon replied with a touch of modesty in her voice. "Now, woman, everybody says so. That's just because my success in the kitchen is due to the fairies helping me around the stove by day and sleeping in the pantry at night. The winged folk guard all of our herbs, eggs, spices, cakes, pickles and pies, jams and jellies, cookies and candies from the night critters that want to steal them. You know as well as I do that one hungry raccoon can do a world of damage in a well-stocked pantry. Well, I reckon we better let the dogs in at night to help guard the larder." MacKennon prodded his lovely wife. "Not going to happen, Mr. Plowman. Dogs are not permitted anywhere near my fairy pantry." Jake smiled with the smile of a man that had lost this particular argument long ago. He topped the front porch steps with a light-hearted leap. It was good to be home. Hannah followed her husband into the spacious, warm kitchen with its pine-board floor and massive creek rock hearth. A long wooden table with matching benches anchored the center of the room's mouth-watering activities. 3 other ladies assisted Jake's wife with food preparation on the farm. Every meal was a magic meal. At the head of the dinner table sat Jonas Whitehand's older sister, Lila Morning Sky. She was calmly shelling speckled beans. A soft wool shawl hung over her elbows and pleasant blouse. Lila's indigo, turquoise, and crimson skirt brushed the floor. She gave the farmer one of her looks that seemed to understand all of his potential mysteries and hidden fears. Morning Sky was a genuine medicine woman, instructed in the old ways by her tribal grandmothers and other sacred teachers. Though Lila would never boast of her training, she knew better. "Close the door! Close the door!" demanded a shiny crow perched on Morning Sky's right shoulder. The black-beaked creature was more than the medicine woman's pet. The fairies referred to him as Lila's familiar, an animal sacred to her heart and destined to share her visions. The native woman called her crow Pelbert, after the name of a seed company that had caught her fancy. Pelbert bobbed his head up and down, greeting Jake with a cackle and a whistle. "I thought we were going to cook that bird for supper. Things sure would be a lot quieter around here," MacKennon joked when he stole a fresh bean from one of Morning Sky's piles. "Not on your life, plowman," Lila remarked without looking up. "Alma is fixin' dumplings instead. I suggest you steal a bite from her pot to snack on instead of my beans." Jake glanced over to the polished iron cook stove with its handy bread-warming shelf and nodded at Miss Alma Barter. Missy, as some folks called her, was even older than Morning Sky, who was pushing 60. Lila's dark, thick braids could have belonged to a much younger woman. Like her brother, Jonas Whitehand, she aged very slowly in appearance. Alma Barter, on the other hand, was nearly 72, with a white bun atop her head and a wrinkled smile. She claimed to be hard of hearing, but Jake found that Alma did not miss much. Alma's life centered on romance. When menfolk were visiting, Missy Barter loved to laugh and carry on. She was a well-known flirt who had never married. She had taught in a one-room school in the eastern woodlands since her 16th birthday. Alma truthfully claimed that she had helped to raise 1,000 children, or young'uns, as she lovingly called them, before retiring and coming to live with the MacKennons. Jake and Hannah had taken her in willingly. So charming was Alma's disposition. The only drawback was the old lady's tendency to dabble in love potions for animals and humans alike. The well-meaning schoolmarm often confused the important ingredients. This led to disastrous results, such as the mule falling in love with the cat, or the billy goat following Lady Hannah around the farm for several days. As Jake surveyed the kitchen, Alma smiled warmly and waved a messy spoon at the farmer. A deep sigh could be heard coming from the third of Hannah's kitchen helpers, who was working to the left of the big stove. Gracie Farrow's slender form, disguised in a smartly pressed black dress, was bent over the kitchen sink. She was scrubbing crockery bowls, wooden platters, and an assortment of tin cups, with a sad but determined look on her face. Jake recalled that the teenager's fiancé had been killed that very summer in a barn fire. The tragedy started after Gracie's father, John Farrow, had stored freshly mowed hay in the loft of his barn. An ugly rumor circled that he had not allowed the grass to dry thoroughly in the sun before tossing it in his loft. Everyone said the damp hay started decomposing and suddenly burst into flames when the temperature of the compressed grass reached a critical point. Darren Carter, just 22 years of age, had died trying to save the Farrows' livestock from the fire, as did Gracie's father. The milk cows had made it out of the collapsing structure in the nick of time, but the two men had perished in the smoking wreckage. Jake always felt that Azastra, the summer fairy princess, was to blame. The fire had foul play written all over it. Because Darren and John were very careful farmers, they would never have stored damp hay in a confined space. Jake also knew that Azastra, selfish to the core, enjoyed playing with fire. Hannah insisted on taking the girl in, for Gracie was barely 19 and had no living relatives, except one uncle that Hannah disapproved of mightily. Jake's wife considered Hank Farrow to be a drunken fool. Such a pretty, vulnerable young lady as Miss Gracie had no business living in her uncle's run-down hunting shack in the backwoods, Hannah had said. "Evening, Miss Gracie," Jake said politely, a little unsure of how to address the mournful teen. Gracie smiled briefly in the farmer's direction and continued with her task of lifting a pot of boiling water off the stove and pouring it into the sink along with shavings of lavender soap. Her rich auburn hair, fine complexion, and wide, earth-colored eyes would indeed have made her a target for an isolated drunk. The fairies whispered that Gracie was probably a child of Silky, a seal maiden from the ancient isles across the sea. These mysterious ocean women had large, kind eyes that were filled with longing. Perhaps Gracie would one day return to a faraway home beneath the frothy waves. Jake, in any case, had fully supported Hannah's generous offer, for the Farrows' family homestead was adjacent to Ghost Horse Hollow. Jake had always thought very highly of his neighbors and was happy to help others in their time of need. "Here, girl, let me give you a hand with that hot water. MacKennon offered with a quick step in Gracie's direction. "Oh, you and your wife had already done plenty for me and my kin," Miss Farrow replied, "and you know I like to do for myself whene'er I can." She shooed Jake away with a toss of bubbles. MacKennon knew it was best not to insist. It would only lead to more protest, and it was true that the homesteaders had done all they could to ease Gracie's burden. Miss Farrow had inherited her father's apple orchards and bee fields after the fire. John Farrow's last will and testament had specifically denied Hank Farrow from receiving any control of the land. There had been bad blood between the two brothers since childhood. Jake and Hannah were left to manage the Farrows' estate as well as Ghost Horse Hollow, since Gracie could not possibly work the 400-acre inheritance by herself. "I made your favorite peach pie, Jake," Hannah interrupted MacKennon's recollections. "There's cornbread in the oven, and a deer roast, soup, beans, and apple dumplings. Lila cooked up a mess of turnip greens, and Gracie fried up plenty of catfish in the cast-iron skillet. Wash up now. Where is everybody? I'll go ring the dinner bell again." Hannah scooted out the front door to the porch, barely pausing for a sweet kiss from the man she both loved and admired. The farmer knew that this was his cue to join his wife for a private talk beyond the listening ears of the kitchen crew. Yet something made him hesitate to turn around. It was the bobcat, Chotaroo, whose striped stub tail and dark ear tufts distinguished him from an ordinary house cat. He was actually a cross between a bright orange tabby and a wandering wildcat. The result was a pumpkin-colored mouse terror weighing nearly 30 pounds, with powerful back legs and large, round, fuzzy paws. The bobcat wanted attention. With a stretch of his spotted belly, Chotaroo reached up to pat at the dangling fringe on Jake's jacket. He playfully climbed the plowman's back as if it were a convenient post, draped himself over Jake's shoulder, and licked the farmer's rough cheek. "Cat! Get off of me!" Jake complained as he caught a whiff of Chotaroo's fur. The smell of pine bark and fresh dirt indicated that the bobcat had been roaming the woods, only to come home for a bowl of warm goat's milk. Pouncing on to the dinner table, the feline snarled at Pelbert, sending the crow into a fluttering fit. The two enemies exchanged a few choice comments before Morning Sky swiped the orange troublemaker to the floor. The medicine woman gave her bird a morsel of stale bread from her lap and continued sorting her beans. "Trouble follows the wind this night," Lila murmured softly to no one in particular. Jake checked his response. Since Morning Sky was known for her accurate gift of prophecy, he felt rooted to the kitchen floor, unable to move his feet in any direction, and a chill glided over his heart. The sound of hooves pounding up gravel cart road pulled the farmer out of his motionless stance. He reached the front door in 2 seconds and looked out to see Eli MacKennon, Jake's striking nephew, sliding down from a dark colt's back before the animal had even skidded to a halt. The horse playfully reared and spun sideways. He then lowered his head and bumped affectionately against the young man's chest. Eli gently fondled the colt's soft lips and simply pointed to the barn, where White Hand was attending to the other horses. The smoky black equine, with 4 white socks and a star, cantered away without hesitation. Such was Cousin Eli's exceptional gift with horses. Jake knew for sure that Ravenwood had never been ridden before that day, though he had received extensive groundwork. "Well, I'd never thought it. Eli, when did you break that horse?" Jake called to the 19-year-old boy with the bronze ponytail and dimpled jaw. "Oh, sometime 'tween milking and cleaning the Farrow's cider press," came the reply. "He weren't no trouble, once I had a talking with him. He's special. Besides, Uncle Jake, you done trained these mountain horses so good in the corral, all a feller need to do is get on 'em and ride." Eli, wiry and compact, jumped onto the porch, skipping every one of Lady Hannah's freshly scrubbed steps. The MacKennons agreed that Jake's nephew could get away with practically anything, due to his white-toothed grin and fetching appearance. "Hey, you old cat," Eli crooned. Chotaroo tossed himself into the teenager's curved, sinewy arms. "Catch yourself a Miss Bobcat today?" Eli flipped his furry friend over for a tummy massage. "Eli MacKennon, every horse is special to you," Hannah said as she put her arm around her husband's shoulders. "Why, you have a way with critters." She nodded, smiling, noting that the wildcat's soft patty toes were waving upside down with pleasure. "I just let 'em be what the Creator made them to be. That's all. Like this worthless cat." Eli tickled Chotaru's soft belly. The bobcat suddenly sprang to the porch railing, where he proceeded to arc his back and sharpen his claws. "A man shouldn't break horses," Eli continued thoughtfully. "He has to understand their way of seeing things and kind of go from there. A trainer's got to stay within the laws of nature and teach his mount not to be afraid of nothing. Then your horse will fall in love with you and do everything you say." "Kind of like a good woman," Jake said, nodding to Hannah, who popped him on the seat of his pants. She led the way to the supper table without saying another word. Eli and Jake's eyes danced with mischief. They were MacKennons, and proud of it. The men were not highly educated, but they were extremely intelligent and intuitive. They spoke without the formal pronunciation that Hannah and her daughter Panther had received from years of study with Queen Titrimia and Sir Phineas Glogol. Language skills were not Eli's and Jake's specialty, but equine expertise was well within their grasp, as was the ability to sculpt wood. Hannah looked back in time to see Aaron Ray pass through the garden gate. Its 8-foot posts, carved in the shape of 2 hooded gnomes, leaned over the metalworker as he passed by. Cousin Eli had sculpted the gnome on Aaron's right, and Uncle Jake had carved the figure on the left. Both Jake and Eli were blessed with the family's gift of finding faces and figures in logs and driftwood. The farm was decorated with garden sculptures and unique furniture, like the heavy chairs that presided at either end of the dining room table. Jake had selected 2 hounds to top the knobs at the back of his chair, and had carved 2 ponies with sweeping manes over Hannah's opposite seat. The men's dryad inheritance was visible in the carvings. Eli and Jake were, after all, descendants of Prince Elevar himself. Wood turned easily in their hands, and the inner spirit of the trees emerged through their steady craftsmanship. "I'd best go ring the dinner bell," Hannah announced. "Seems like each dish is just about ready. I think we got something for every member of this hungry crew." Rarely was anyone late for supper in Ghost Horse Hollow. Hannah MacKennon believed that good cooking maintained good spirits, and that meant good health for everyone. She lovingly served favorite dishes and mouth-watering recipes to suit the eclectic tastes of her family. Some folks preferred vegetables, while others preferred wild game, hunted with honor and respect. Gracie loved fruit and muffins, but White Hand ate only meat, nuts, roots, and herbs. Aaron Ray was very fond of cornbread and gravy. Jake and Hannah ate quite moderately. Eli, on the other hand, ate everything in sight. Of course, the fairies wanted nothing but sweets and pickles. It was difficult providing for them all, but Hannah thought it her duty to keep a bountiful kitchen. Supper was laid out on the table now, and it was high time for their country dinner. "Has anyone seen Panther?" she asked innocently. "In the parlor with Addie, I do believe," Alma responded, still stirring her dumplings. Hannah nodded and hung up her white apron on a peg. In the midst of the peaceful, bustling kitchen, Lady Hannah MacKennon had no idea what lay in store for her family that night, and what terrifying changes the rising moon would bring. Thank you for listening to my Family Book Nook podcast. Subscribe to our blog at myfamilybooknook.blogspot.com and follow us on Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube at Ghost Horse Hollow and Ghost Horse Gift Gallery. To advertise with my Family Book Nook, contact Podbean's Pod Ads program for more information. Join us each Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time USA for another episode in the exciting saga of the MacKennon homesteaders, as well as stories from around the globe. Podbean.com podcasts are available through a convenient app on your PC, tablet, or cell phone. Listen anytime. We appreciate your sharing my Family Book Nook episodes with your friends and family on social media. Watch it grow. Special thanks to the lovely Price Sisters on the web at thepricesisters.com for our closing music. Follow me on Instagram, Ann_ghost_horse. This is Ann Severn Williamson, and it's been a pleasure